Right, which now brings me to our next part in the presentation, because what we got to understand too is that English common law was a constant evolution. And over time we realized, well, hold on, you know, people are in here for damages, for injuries, getting hurt in these courtrooms, and we're judging things off of past precedents. But now we're coming up with new problems, and these new problems dealt with business. It wasn't so much of somebody physically hurting somebody, but dealing with contracts and maybe not treating things fairly. So they needed to create something for civil lawsuits. And that's when they created the Chancery Courts, which was a court that was put together specifically just for fairness, y'all, that dealt with trusts, wills, probate, custody, bills, and things of that nature. It wasn't for anything criminal. It wasn't for anything of that nature. This was purely on fairness. Did you do what you said you were going to do? That's specifically what it was about. Now, the difference between these chancery courts was that there was no monetary awards, all right? Unlike constitutional and common law offenses, they gave you rewards for fairness. Monetary rewards weren't always adequate to compensate the injured party effectively for its loss, so the chancellor created ways of granting equitable relief. Equitable relief is very important, because when we go in here to these chancery courts, that's what we're trying to go for. We want equitable relief. If you made a promise, or if you had a trustee or fiduciary duty to me to do something that you said that you were going to do, you better do it. If not, that's a breach of contract, and we need to take you to these chancery courts so that we can get our equitable reliefs. That's where we get our remedies, y'all, okay? Because there is no jury, there is none of this. All it is just the judge that's sitting here looking at the facts, and he's gonna look at the facts and say, did you do what you said you were gonna do? Common types of equitable relief are injunctions and specific performance. These are the two that I want you all to focus on: injunctions and specific performance. Because we have injunctions here at iSelf Law and Masters written up for every single state, and an injunction is basically just a notice putting people on notice about who you are and how you're operating, right? Because we have common law injunctions that just let them know and put public officials and agents on notice about your constitutional protections. That's it. It's just a contract. And once you put them on notice and they accept your documents and they don't rebut it, which they can't because they swore to uphold their constitutional rights, y'all, they have to accept it. And once they accept this injunction, it becomes a contract, okay? And now if they ever infringe on you from that day forward after accepting that contract, saying that we're gonna respect your constitutional protections, but then we pull you over for driving and speeding, which is unconstitutional, we have broken that contract, which means there was a breach. That means we take them to that chancery court, and that's where we get our remedies, because they breached the contract. Right? And if we said, yo, it was a violation of $9,000 for every single breach that you broke that contract that we agreed to, then that's what you're gonna pay me when I go to this chancery court, because that's all I want. Judge, I'm just here for fairness. I'm not so much here because I want money. I'm here because I want the fees for the violations of the contract that they violated, okay? Understand, it's business, y'all. And if we can just learn to do the business like how they doing business, then maybe they'll stop railroading us. Right? All right. Another type of equitable relief is specific performance, right? Because when we get to talking about tendering special deposits and setting off accounts and balances, it's going to be very important, because you all are setting up trust with these people. And when people are setting up trust and people are acting as trustees and you're the beneficiary, all I can say is these people have obligations and they better do it for you, okay? And if they don't, that means it becomes a breach of contract too as well. And this is where we always go to get our equitable reliefs, right here in the chancery courts, y'all. So remember that, equitable relief. We want fairness, okay? This next part of the demonstration brings me to family. And it's one of the most important parts of all of this, because getting your status and your affairs together is one thing, but actually going back to rebuild and structure family is the most important part of all of this, because y'all have to go back and build your families up, y'all. All right? But When I say there's been families in this world who've been fighting for power over the entire world for hundreds of years, we have no clue how deep the depths of this really goes, all right? Which brings me to people like the Colons and the Orsini family. The Colons, the Colonnas, and the Orsini family has fought since the Middle Ages to be the popes of the Catholic Church, to be the leaders and be the heads so that they could rule the church that could actually rule the world. To stop the fighting between each family, they actually had members marry each other and they bred the two bloodlines together. And from there, the Colonna family influenced the District of Columbia, the Columbia Pictures, Colombia in South America, right? And the Colons actually helped colonize the Americas, okay? Because behind every single pope in Vatican, there was actually a family that was actually paying and investing and supporting and funding most of the things that were going on in the church. And I don't know if you've all have ever seen The Godfather 3, but that's a perfect example of showing how mafia families and just certain families were supporting and backing and funding the whole Catholic Church, right? And this was a Catholic Church that had millions of followers, y'all, all right? And this all led back to families, just like the Colons and the Orsini family, y'all. So as much as we want to argue and get mad over who we're voting for, Democrat, whether it's Republican, understand that there are families already that have a whole agenda in place for this whole corporation that you are living in, this whole perception in this matrix. You couldn't vote for the president of your daily job, but you think you're going to vote for the president of the entire country. Interesting. Moving along. Which brings me to my next part, the Roman Church and these families who all came together. And it brings me to Pope Boniface VIII, right, in 1302. In 1302, Pope Boniface VIII passed something called the Unum Sanctum, right? And these Unum Sanctums, the bull papers declared that the Roman pontiff has supreme control over the material world. And the Roman pontiff was declared the governor of both the soul and the body, right? So I know you all have seen those confession booths in those Catholic churches. And you know, you always have like a Catholic priest who's sitting in there and you just go up and you confess your sins for all of the bad that you've done. And basically he's like the middleman between you and God to make sure that your message is heard, right? This all goes back to Pope Boniface VIII, right? When he basically said, we want all people to be subjects of the Roman pontiff, okay? So you bring your problems to them and they basically bring them to God and make sure that you are forgiven. Gotta have a middleman. That's exactly what that was put in place for. And basically this gave the authorization to go out and conquer more lands all across the world and civilize the savages, right? No different than they civilized the Anglo-Saxons there in England, right? The indigenous brothers and sisters there, and they civilized them. They said, well, you know what? We got this blueprint. Why not take this all the way across the world? Why not take this to the Americas? Why not take this to the Africas? You know, all of that. If you notice and you realize, right, Europe and the Roman Empire doesn't speak our native languages, right? But yet here in America, we speak Spanish, right? We speak French. We speak all of their native languages because they were the ones who came over and conquered many of these American lands. And this was all on behalf of the Catholic Church, who was actually utilizing kings and nations to go out there and do his dirty work. It is what it is. We got to wake up and understand and realize what's going on, because it all started with the Unum Sanctum. And these are documented papers, y'all. They gave them the authority to go out here and conquer the world and civilize everybody and turn them into Christians in Jesus' name. Okay? That's important. And then come along, you had King Henry VIII. A very, very, very important king in English history, because basically he was a rebel. In 1534, King Henry of England split from the Catholic Church and made himself the head of the Church of England. Why did he do this? Because he wanted to divorce one of his wives and the Catholic Church would not let him do it. So he said, you know what? I'm the king. I'm going to do what I want to do. And basically you say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start our own church now, the Church of England. Now, this was a domino effect because it started many different wars, many religious wars there in Europe between the Catholic Church and many of the nations that the Catholic Church was behind, fighting there with England, okay? So during these times of religious wars in Europe, many people abandoned England and their states. Remember, there's wars going on now, and whether I want to be a part of the English church that King Henry is supporting, or if I want to be a part of the Catholic Church that the Catholics are supporting, or maybe I just want to be a Protestant and say, you know what, I don't want anything to do with this. So you know what, I'm going to separate and I'm just going to totally leave the country. Now, what ended up happening is you have many people who ended up abandoning their estates. They left their homes, they left their properties, and many landlords couldn't get paid. So now we have another problem and situation here. Now we have many landlords who are complaining and writing writs to the king like, yo, how am I going to get money? I can't get paid. The tenants are leaving. What are we going to do? That's when King Henry passed the Cestui Que Vie Act of 1540 to ultimately assume control over all English estates through trust until a beneficiary came back to claim control over them. All right. So basically, after 7 years, if somebody had abandoned their estate and didn't come back to control them, then basically King Henry said, well, you know what? The state is going to take control over this, and we're going to assume that it is state property. Right? It's no different than when a child is born in this system and you don't actually go back and set up their affairs in their estate to go claim control over it. Then the state is going to assume control over that and make it its state property. This is why we go back and we authenticate that birth certificate. It's one of the first things we do in there. All it is just a notice in their system to let them know, hey, we're a living man. We've come back to take control over this estate that was in your system. It's no longer abandoned. It's no longer vacant. We're coming now to take control over this estate, and we can also claim damages against anybody who infringed on it. Okay? This is very important, which now brings me to what is a trust? What is the Cestui Que Vie? How does it even operate? How does a trust operate? Well, I would like to first start off by saying that there's 3 key positions in a trust, especially in the Cestui Que Vie. You have a grantor and executor. This is the person who creates the trust, right? This is the person who grants it, who gives the permission for it to be open. And then you also have a trustee. This is the person who's managing the assets of the trust. So whatever the grantor deposits into this trust, whether it's property, whether it's money, the trustee is the one who's going to manage it, who's going to take control over it and watch over it for the executor and the grantor. And then there's one more key position, which is the beneficiary. This is the one that the trustee is managing all these assets for the benefit of the beneficiary. Okay, so 3 key positions: the grantor, the trustee, and the beneficiary. Well, let me tell you a story. When you were first navigating in the waters of your mother, right, and you were just swimming in her waters. Again, we're on maritime law. All right, you were cargo on your mother's vessel. Okay, because your mother is a vessel in these maritime waters. And the very first thing that she arrived to when she was ready to give birth was the dock. That was the very first thing she came to, was the dock, which is the doctor. And then that's when the doctor actually went on to your mother's vessel and he unloaded the cargo, right? Which was you, right? And that's when he turned around and he took out a warehouse receipt, right? Which is really, quote unquote, that birth certificate. And he actually documented your height, your weight, your size, everything. And he put this on this warehouse receipt. And then he turned around and had it signed by the mother. And then he gave it to the registrar. And the registrar signed it because they registered you as state property. Okay? And that's how they brought you into their system as an employee, as a corporate subject, yo. Okay? All right? They literally created a trust. Your mother granted it by giving away the property to the trust, which was the baby. Okay? They granted you as the baby the property to fund the trust. And then that's when the United States, and that's when the state said, okay, well, shit, well, we're going to go ahead and take this baby and set up this trust. We're going to use this baby as collateral. He's going to be the property to back this trust up. But, you know, we're going to do everything and give him benefits. So everything, when you're talking about Social Security, when you're talking about credit, you're talking about grants, you're talking about loan, all of these things, all of these government benefits all come from that trust that was created and set up to you by your mother initially. All right. So this is very important, that Cestui Que Vie Trust, right? So the name of the game is we must stop acting or operating as the principle of that Cestui Que Vie Trust. We must stop acting as the name, all caps, and we must separate ourselves and now start speaking as the agent over that principle of that trust. You understand? Our whole lives we have been operating as that name, all caps, that you see on that driver's license or on that passport, but we are not that. We don't write our names when we put it on paper in uppercase, uppercase, uppercase. We put it in uppercase, lowercase, because we're a living man, and that's according to the rules of the English language. Okay, so we must learn to start separating ourselves from the name, all caps, because that is a business. If you created a business, you know that you are separate from that business and you just control that business. We must get in the mindset of that when we think about our names and our estates. Our names and our estates were businesses that were created for us at birth, and we must separate ourselves and learn how to start speaking for that business. All right, fair enough. All right, because we always knew about the game, right? We know about the NFL. We know about the NBA. We know about the NHL. We know about the MLB. There's always players in the game, but yet who speaks for them? The agent. Okay? So we need to learn how to start separating ourselves and start speaking for our estate as the agent. You need to become the power of attorney to speak for your life. You don't need to go out and hire anybody. All you need to do is learn the law as a common law barrister and stand on it and assert your common law protections, yo. That's it. Very simple, okay? Become the law. Now, it's important to also know in the Cestui Que Vie Trust, it says we are the one with the beneficial interest in and out of an estate with the equitable right to the property, proceeds, and the profits, y'all. We have the equitable right to the property and the proceeds, y'all. All the beneficial interest belongs to us because this is a trust that was set up for our benefit. If I gave you substance, you're supposed to give me substance back. If I gave you my social, right, and that is a line of open access to my credit, you need to give me substance back, which is a property, a product, or some type of car, vehicle, or asset, yo. That is a trade for a trade. It doesn't make sense for me to give you substance and all access to my credit with my social, then you give me a product and give me access to that, then I turn around and still pay you in cash with another form of substance, yo. What kind of sense does that make, right? So when we understand trust laws, when we understand who's supposed to be who, we'll know that somebody is supposed to be playing a trustee position and actually be balancing the books for us instead of us working a 9 to 5 all damn day, paying for things that were already paid off at the moment we signed for them. Because they're taking your security instruments and those applications and contracts that you're signing and they're flipping them for multiple amounts of money. And yet you're telling me you're still going to turn around and make a payment. Do you know where you are? Do you understand the law? Which now brings me to the fall of England and the rise of Great Britain. Because we got to understand that we are living in a dual society, y'all. We are living in a society that's operating under Roman military laws and a society that's operating under English common law. The 1707 Act of Union united the sovereign countries of England, Scotland, and later North Ireland to create a new United Kingdom. They took sovereign republics, sovereign countries, and then they brought them together to create a corporate United Kingdom. This is important because basically you had Queen Anne, who extended the provisions of King Henry's Cestui Que Vie Act and extended the use of the Cestui Que Vie Trust. Now it was going to be ultimately used for corporate and franchise purposes. So Queen Anne at the time, also her heir had passed away and she didn't have anybody to take on after her after she died. So they ended up passing the throne over to a German king who was backed by the Catholic Pope. Now remind you, you have to remember that the Catholic Church had just broken up from the English church, less than 100 years ago from then, right? And you had King Henry VIII, who separated and started the Church of England. And now you have the Catholic Church, who saw a way to get back in to the English nation. Because he was like, oh, we got this woman here who doesn't have an heir. But, you know, if we go ahead and sing this next king from Germany over here, who's backed by the Catholic Church, he'll do what we say. And basically, a German-backed king by the Catholic Church took over the English throne, and now the UK would be used as a vehicle for the unum sanctum and their original purpose to take over the world. And now this is when they said, well, hey, everywhere that there's an English colony, let's go back and set up British laws now that are backed by civil codes and statutes, okay? So everywhere that they had the colonies, everywhere they had commonwealths, they went to Canada, they went to the United States, they went to Jamaica, they went all over. Everywhere that the Englishmen went and set up his English common laws, they went back and implemented Roman military law now, codes and statutes, which is very, very, very important because now we have the choice. Nowhere on our birth certificate does it say that we are U.S. citizens. But yet we still go out here on applications and we freely check that we are, because we're saying that we want to operate in Rome under his citizens' codes and statutes, okay? That's very important because none of us have to operate under Rome. We can always operate under our common laws that we all share in common. But if you do not know, if you aren't educated about the Republic and your private rights, then therefore we're going to naturally walk right into slavery. No way that we took a pledge every morning to the United States of America and to the Republic, and then we went out here and did some democratic civil shit. How backwards are we? So we must take the time to stop, slow down, and just actually understand what's going on around us, because we are moving ass backwards, my brothers and sisters. Okay? This is very important because there is a way out. And this is just the first part, which leads us to the Declaration of Alienage and Section 4 of the UK of the Naturalization Act of 1870. So, Section 4 of the UK Naturalization Act of 1870 introduced a provision that persons born in Her Majesty's dominions who were, at birth, both born as British subjects and nationals of a foreign country could renounce their British status in favor of the foreign one by making a declaration of alienage. All right? Provision was also made that persons who voluntarily acquired a foreign nationality abroad through naturalization would automatically lose their British nationality too as well. Now this is important because as US citizens, you are still British subjects. As Canadian citizens, you are still British subjects. As Jamaican citizens, you are still British subjects. So the very first thing that we need to do is actually establish our Declaration of Alienage, y'all. And we can help you with that on our selflawandmaster.com. So this is important because we have to unlearn and relearn, and we have to start removing the veil. And it starts with making that declaration, right? Nobody has to be a corporate subject of Rome or Britain, right? We can go back to our common laws for the common people, for us as we private Americans, as private Canadians, as private Europeans and private Englishmen, wherever you are in the world, we can go back to our protections and our God-given rights. So that's it for Do You Know the Truth Part 1. Definitely follow me on Instagram at BrothaTruth.com. And of course, you can catch me on OurSelfLawandMaster.com.
When our people need direction, we give their status a correction. It's never about what you do, but how do it.